When you first open up SAS, you're going to see the editor window and the log window, and then on the left panel you're going to see this Explorer window. Now today we're not going to talk about how you use the Explorer window, but if we click on the Results panel, you will see that as we run some SAS programs, they will also show up in the Results panel. If we wanted to look at the Output window, we would click on Output. At this point, since we haven't run any SAS programs, we don't see anything in the Output window. So let's click on the Editor window and expand it. And I am going to open up a SAS program called Introduction that I have posted for you as a Word document. If you want, later you can copy the contents of the Word document into SAS and try running the program I'm going to demonstrate for you now. So I'm going to go File, Open Program, and I'm going to go to the place where I've saved this program called Introduction. Okay, so this is a program that I've written, and we're going to start by taking a look at the first part of the code, the first set of code that's going to create a temporary data set called students. So we have a data statement, and I have an in-file statement that tells me that my data is going to appear within the program under data lines. And I'm inputting 5 variables: name, ID, gender, actually 6 variables, grade point average, height, and weight. Notice that for the variables name and gender, I have a $sign following them. That's because these variables are character variables, and I need to tell SAS that they are character variables, and I do that with the $sign. And then I have a proc print, which is basically going to print out the observations in this data set students that I'm creating. So let's go ahead and run this program. I'm going to highlight this first set of data, and I'm going to click on the little man, the run man, and submit my data. And then you see that our output window is open, and we see here that we have 5 observations and 6 variables. Let's also go to the log window and see what the log says. So if we scroll up, it tells us that the data set work.students has 5 observations and 6 variables. Whenever you create a temporary SAS data set, that is a data set that we only use during that current session of SAS, SAS automatically attaches the prefix work dot. And that means that it's just a temporary data set. And then we have our proc print, and it states here that there were 5 observations read from the data set work.students. So it looks like our program ran. We don't have any errors. We don't have any warnings. Also notice that if we look in the results panel, it tells us that SAS printed out the data. So let's go back to our editor window, and let's look at this next bit of code. So here, it's actually exactly the same program. The only thing that's different about it is that I've added some comments. Now remember, there are 2 ways to create a comment in SAS. You can have a slash asterisk that starts the comment and an asterisk slash that ends the comment. So basically here I've created a comment box which tells you what I'm doing with this program. This is a simple SAS program to introduce you to the 2 parts of the SAS program, the data step and the proc step. Here's another comment. Notice here that with this comment, I start with an asterisk and end with a semicolon. And then I've added a couple of other comments. The reason I'm encouraging you to comment your code is because it makes it more readable and understandable for other people who are looking at your program, as well as if you were to return to this program at some later point and it was a more complicated program, you would have some understanding of what you were trying to do with the program. Now in SAS, every time you write a comment, it appears in green. That is if we're working with the PC SAS. So let's run this code and see what happens. We're going to click on the little man. And notice here that when you go to the output window, the new output is appended to the bottom of the old. So if we page up, this was the output from the first time we ran the program. If we page down, this is the output from the second time we've run the program. Notice also that our results panel shows that we've did another printout of the dataset students. The other thing I want to point out is notice here we now have a title, print out of dataset students. So let's go back to our program and you'll see here that I've added a title statement in the proc print procedure. And basically I've just put in a statement title with the title that I want in quotes, and then of course a semicolon. With this program, I've added some comments, I've added a title statement. Notice that the comments don't show up at all in the output. That is just in the editor window to help you understand what I'm doing with your code. Okay, let's go down and look at this third program. So here I'm doing a few more things. I've created a new variable in my data step called BMI. So I have a formula here. And notice I've created BMI and I put that statement above the data lines. So the last thing that goes in this data step before running the program to create the data step is the data lines and the actual data. And again, one thing that's very helpful with SAS is that things show up in colors. So the data that follows this data lines statement are all in yellow. And those are the data that I'm entering into this program. I've added a couple of more procedures. Besides just doing a proc print, I've also done a proc freq to look at the distribution of gender. I've also done a proc means that's going to do descriptive statistics on the variables GPA, grade point average, and BMI. Another thing I want to point out to you is notice that with the proc print and the title statement, I don't have a run statement here. That's okay. As long as there's another procedure or another data step following these two lines, proc print and the title statement, this procedure will run. So the actual run statement is not required as long as there's another proc or another data step following. So this statement is the same as if I had also typed in run. So either way, this code would work. So again, let's highlight this code and let's run it and see what we have. Okay, let's click on the little running man. And again, notice that the last procedure in the output window. So we're going to have to page up to see the different things that were run in this program. So if we page up, the first thing that was run in this last program for you is the printout of the data set students. Then we show the distribution of gender, that we have 2 females, 3 males. It gives the percentage, the cumulative frequency, and the cumulative percent. And then we have descriptive statistics for our grade point average and BMI. And again, if we go over to our results window, we see that these were the results that were printed in our output screen. Okay, let's go back to the program and let's kind of have a little fun. I'm going to go and show you what happens if we don't write our code perfectly and if we actually have some errors. So here is a program that looks exactly like the programs we've been running before. And I'm going to run it and let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm highlighting the code and submitting it. And let's see, it looks like the data ran. We have a printout. But if we look closely, it looks like something weird. Because notice here that for grade point average, SAS has printed a period. Now above, we know that in these other printouts of the data set, that we always had every student showing a grade point average. But in this last time, it's missing. What happened? Well, this is where I'm going to go and look at my log. So let's go up in the log and notice here in this program, we see a note, invalid data for GPA in line 90, columns 16 to 18. And here it actually tells you where the error is. So let's go back and look at the code. Here I made a mistake. Instead of entering 3.0, I entered 3. The letter O. Well, when SAS saw this is not a number, so they printed it out as a missing. And that's why when you look in the output, for this person, Michelle, the grade point average is missing. Here's another example of some code. Again, it looks very much like what we've been running before. So again, I'm going to highlight this and run it. Nothing happened. It didn't even go to the output window at all. So if you try to run a program and nothing happens at all, that means there's an error. And you immediately want to look at the log. So let's go to the log, and then let's take a look. And you see that errors show up in red, and it tells us there's a syntax error. And if we look more closely, we have our proc print data equals students, but we're missing a semicolon. And that's why the program didn't run. A good portion of the time that your programs don't run, it's because you've left out a semicolon. So if we go back here and we see this is where I left out my semicolon. If I put the semicolon in and go ahead and run the procedure, you'll see that now the program ran. And here's the last error I want to show you. So here, once again, we are creating a new variable, BMI, from height and weight. And then I want to run descriptive statistics on it. So I'm going to highlight this section of code, and I'm going to run the program. And once again, the program ran. We went to the output screen, but notice something very weird. We don't have a BMI calculated. Again, because the output doesn't look like it should, we're going to look at our log window, and let's scroll on up and let's see what happened here. So we have a couple of notes. It says the variable weight is uninitialized. So what does that mean? Well, let's look here. We input name, ID, gender, grade point average, height, and weight. However, the way that we inputted the variable, weight was spelled WT. But notice when I wanted to create BMI, I spelled weight WGT. And so SAS gives us the note that the variable weight is uninitialized. It doesn't know that variable. It's never seen it before. And so because it's not a recognizable variable, SAS automatically sets BMI equal to missing. So these are just some examples of the kinds of errors that you might have when you're starting to write your own program. The last thing I want to show you before we finish this video is that notice we have an awful lot of information now in our output window. And sometimes these output windows can get very crowded and you're not sure what analysis you're on. And so it's helpful to know how to clear out the output window. And you can do that by just pressing Control-E on your keyboard, and that will automatically clear out the output window. Control-E clears it out. So now our output window is empty. We can do the same to our log. We can clear out the log at a certain point by clicking Control-E, and the log is empty. So here we're back in our editor window with our program, and if we're having written the program, getting ready to exit SAS, then we're going to want to go under File, Save, or Save As your program. So here I'm going to save it, and then to exit out of SAS, you just press File and then Exit.